I'd like to welcome you to the panel discussion at the Roger Williams 100th commemorative birthday. This is Alice, Roger's daughter, and I'd like to introduce the panel members today, each who worked with my father or with his music.
Jimmy Carnelli and Michael George were part of his band for over 15 years. And Jimmy was the drummer, and Michael was the bass player. And this gentleman here, Jim Pedersen, is a representative for Ralph Carmichael, who, as Joellen discussed, was an arranger that worked with my father for many years, and with many, many great artists. So he has some wonderful stories that Ralph shared with him. And then on this side, we have Buddy Clement, who worked with the Crystal Cathedral Orchestra, and he was associate conductor, tuba player, got big lungs, and bass trombone. So he has wonderful stories to share too. And of course, the very interesting part of the panel that never met my father, but definitely met him through his music. And so they're going to share what it was like trying to recreate the music that was on paper. So we'll start with Mr. Jeff Held, who is music professor, assistant dean, he's a long time, so I gotta read it, Concordia University Irvine conductor, and Concordia University Orchestra. What a show.
Thank you.
That was
Thank you
just
very much.
amazing. We were all emotional. I mean, so professional. And those kids just played their heart out, and you really pulled it out of them.
Oh, thank you so
bravo.
much. Well, I'll say, I do feel like I know your dad now. I think his music is exceptional. He arranges so well, and of course works with tremendous orchestrators and musicians all along. It's been a real joy. Leading a college orchestra, one of my important jobs is to teach them a lot of different kinds of music. The hardest thing we're doing right now is Beethoven's Third Symphony. We'll perform that in 2 weeks. It was really wonderful to take a break from that and turn to this important music. Here we are in Orange County, not too far from Hollywood, and there is a great musical tradition. There's a way of writing string parts and orchestrating it with winds that really does come out of Hollywood, and that's a lot of what we got to play today. And that is really fun to play, and it's really important for our students to understand those styles, and also just the opportunities for them to get introduced to musical legends that were legendary far before they were even born. So, if I would have asked, hey, do you guys know who Roger Williams is? I don't know how many hands I would have gotten. I actually didn't get all that many hands when I said, do you know who Pat Boone is? And I got a few hands, and I said, how about this? 50 million records. And they're like, oh, okay, so it's been a real pleasure to do what we do here, and thanks to a wonderful audience today. It was really magical. Thank you.
What was the process of bringing the music back to life from a score?
Well, you're the one who dug through all the boxes.
I did.
I listened to a lot of the Roger Williams catalog and we did the concert last year, came up with a program, and Alice, thank you, Alice, she would come back and go, well, I found one like it. How about that? I'm like, no, keep looking.
You're missing the trombone.
Yeah, we were missing parts. It's not easy. You got to realize that most of the music we played today, it was not really written to be played over and over again. And so the parts have a lot of, stuff crossed out and extra numbers put in, and we have to interpret all of that.
I think they know.
Yeah. But that, again, is it's so important for students to learn how to play orchestra music that doesn't have totally clean parts. If you go into a recording session, that's just how it is, because the creation process is happening on the spot, and so that was a great experience.
Okay. Oh. Well, it came out great. What can I say? And you were saying that a lot of centennials are marked with concerts.
They are, yeah.
And I think you kind of brought up the point that it's basically introducing kids to music they've never experienced before.
Yeah, I've made a concerted effort to celebrate a number of centennials or anniversaries. We did a big Leonard Bernstein concert a few years ago in his centennial at the university. Actually kind of similar in scope to this. It was really neat. We were in Normandy a few years ago for the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and we got to play there at the American Cemetery and at Normandy Beach on June 6th. It was really, really special. And so these are ways that we can, in a really visceral way, bring the students into something important in history, or I don't like to call music history so much. There's a historical element to it, but like we heard tonight, there's nothing historic about the music we heard. It still can continue today if you have musicians willing to do the work to pull the music together and have some genius pianists that can play the parts without them. Those were never written down. Roger just knew them. And so Bryan had to do quite a study to do what he did today.
Speaking of Mr. Pezzone, Bryan, you shared some wonderful thoughts with me. And, well, first of all, I mean, wasn't he amazing?
Yeah.
To take on a challenge like this, when the expectations are kind of high, and you did it with such grace and such talent, so beautiful to watch, and just I could hear my daddy right through your fingers,
My privilege.
So, what was it like learning this music without notes?
Well, I'm fortunate to have. I grew up in a blue-collar family, so which means that. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So for family reasons, I had to live at my grandfather's house, and my great-grandma had a piano. So when I was about 2 years old, my uncle would walk me down to the piano. So I started out by ear, and I learned chords, and I improvised, and I learned songs. But then the other part of me, like your father, I also went to Eastman School of Music. I won concerto competitions. And so I developed the kind of dexterity and virtuosity that you need to be able to play. And as soon as I started listening to your dad playing there, and listening to the music and watching what he did, the first thing that struck me is his love affair with the piano, but also using it to touch people. There was not a moment that went by when he was not using it and using himself to touch other people. And there was nothing blasé at all about his playing. And so he would have these arrangements, and this is a funny story for this one. If you want to, depending on the kind of musician you are, you could try to write down every single note and every single little thing, but that's going to take a couple years, and that's very important. And then by the time you end up practicing something like that, then it's really a kind of a very, very left-brain personality. It comes off stodgy and not fluid. So because I know my scales and arpeggios and my chords and other things, I could listen and watch him play and go, oh, he's doing this that way, he's doing this in an unusual way. And so he not only had the virtuosic training to do everything that a pianist is taught to do in the conservatory, but he invented a lot of his own things that really blew my mind when I watched him play. And I said, that is so effective. It's like the 20th century lists in a way, but not, as all over the piano. And he picked up a few tools, and the way he used them was to produce effects and to tell stories about the birds and the phantom and the wind, and however you needed to illustrate the essence of the words of the music and the essence of the music, just like in Autumn Leaves. It's incredible. So just knowing that I could, all I did, the only thing they ever really wrote down was what they call the form of the piece. This comes after this, especially when it's with orchestra, because the orchestra part's written saying, okay, this will be this section, this section, and that section. And then in the meantime, there were just scratch notes saying, okay, it's this chord, this chord, this chord. And this is a funny story. When I started working on this a while ago, but I'm pretty lazy in a way when it comes to everything else. So my printer broke. So I wanted to print out manuscript paper. I said, I didn't. All I did was take regular blank paper and I drew lines like this. And I just drew bar lines. I said, okay, it's this chord, he's moving here, he's using this technique, he's going from here, he's going from here, he's going from here. But it's been astonishing to, I like to be a sponge. I like to soak. I've been soaking up everything since I was a child, and I'm still a child. I see baby hands. So to be able to have soaked up your father's music and his love and his joy and his range and capacity for both dynamics and expression and technique, because there was talking to Joe, right? Or Jimmy, sorry. It wasn't only in the virtuosity of his playing, but the heart that he could put into a single line, a single melody, was just unbelievable. So, with something like with Abide With Me, where I could see him communing with God as he's playing, and you could feel it, and he's translating it.
It's true.
So
absolutely
that it's so palpable and so obvious as a player to me that these general things, not talking about music theory, but these general things are so apparent in his playing and relationship with the instrument to communicate something meaningful. That's what really makes the artist, and that's what creates a lifelong just love affair with wanting to explore more and wanting to touch more and wanting to play for people more and wanting to, be the kind of artist that he is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
What was it like playing with that mask?
I had never played with a mask before. It was kind of funny. I bought it off of Amazon. And I saw it had notes on it, and then because these glasses are a little shoddy too, I had a tough time. I like to make a little acting scene, a little comedy out of things. But when they finally got on, all I'll say is that wearing the Phantom mask, it puts you. It doesn't matter what you can see. You can see enough. But it puts you in character.
Yeah.
When it puts you in character,
You were totally the Phantom.
You become the phantom.
and
you don't hold back. You know, and with these big banging chords, it does. It's like you're transformed into the character. That's what it's like wearing masks.
Very cool. Well, you did great. It's really fun. It's a fun song. And funny. You had some wonderful things to share about my father, too, some very tender thoughts. You were with the Crystal Cathedral Orchestra for, goodness, many years, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you wanted to share, well, let me say one thing. My father had something that he lived by, a belief that he, and I'll say this only because it leads up to what we'll talk about, but he always used to tell us, be prepared, because you never know when opportunities in life are going to knock on your door. And he compared it to a carousel that he used to ride as a child. And I've never seen this type of carousel, but he described it, so I feel like I have. But back in those days, the carousel would go around, and I guess there was a stand that had a ring that you could catch. Oh, you know. A brat, you know about it. Okay, well, I guess. Oh well. I never saw it. Anyway, he said if you caught the brass ring, you'd get a free ride. Is that right? Yeah? Okay. That's what he told me. And if you miss it, you might not get a chance to go and get it again. So you have to be prepared. And so he always told us, work, 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 because you never know when that opportunity is going to knock on your door. And when it does, you're ready. And that's what he felt like when the chance of a lifetime, as Joellen told you about, and the Arthur Godfrey opportunities came up, he was ready. And that's how he was able to do so well. So he had a big painting, you guys know this shoe in the house, big painting of a carousel, which of course I have in my house now, and it inspires me, right next to gold piano. And he had little carousel figurines around the house too, and it was always a reminder of that ideology. So, I think you know where I'm headed.
It was, you know, like everybody, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. Well, like everybody, we grew up listening to Roger. Roger saw him, I don't know, a million times on television, and of course his recordings. And so when I had the opportunity to be in the orchestra at the Crystal Cathedral for a long time, Roger, of course, was there very frequently, and you know, it was just a dream come true, just to be in the orchestra and be that, just to see him, but to be that close, and to be able to watch his hands, and of course they had jumbotron, you know, big screens in there. A lot of times they zoom in on his hands, and you really had to stay focused on playing, because you could get real distracted, you know, watching his fingers. But so what happened was, it was an Easter, particularly Easter, and Roger was there, was going to be the guest artist, and we at the orchestra would get there real early, sometimes 6 o'clock in the morning, to rehearse the music, and then the artist would come on and we'd rehearse usually once or twice through, and then there'd be a little break, and then they would have usually one or at least 2 services, sometimes 3. But on big holidays like Christmas and Easter, they would have multiple services, and this particular year, and I don't recall exactly why, but we had 2 or 3, I think it was 3 services, and then in the afternoon, for some reason, they had, at the Crystal Cathedral downstairs, they had like recording studios and things. The orchestra was supposed to go downstairs and record a series of background music for some commercials or something, and we'd never done that before. But that was happening. And then we were going to have an evening service for Easter, and Roger was going to play on that. And so it was a busy, busy, busy day. So I was there sitting in the back row where tubas generally sit. And I was talking with a bass trombone player next to me, and we were horsing around, kidding around, and we were waiting for the conductor to show up. And real lovable guy. And anyway, he wasn't there. He was kind of late. And a guy tapped me on the shoulder. It was the music librarian. And he just interrupted and said, "Hey, do you think you could conduct this orchestra?" And I thought it was this hypothetical, and I said, "Sure." You know, I said, "Half the people here could do that." So he said, "Oh, okay, good." I said, "Okay." And so we went on telling jokes and stuff. And a little while later, he came back, tapped me on the shoulder, and I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Go ahead." I said, "Go ahead, what?" And he said, "Go ahead and conduct the orchestra." I said, "Are you out of your mind?" I said, What? And he says, "Well, you know, Johnny's not here, and nobody knows where he's at." And he was, and I don't mind, everybody loved Johnny Carl. It's just, sometimes he was that particular, he just had a really rough time of it, and he just didn't show up. And so, so I just went over, and, you know, I spent a big hunk of my career as a music educator and conductor and director. And so, you know, I'm used to looking at scores and conducting, and I wasn't worried about that, but I didn't know any of this music. And so I just stood up and I said to the orchestra, you know, surprise, I know, you know, I said, "I know half of you guys could do this too, but they asked me to do it, so, you know, we'll just do the best we can. I'm not Johnny, but, you know, we'll just make the best of it." So they were all professionals, of course, and it went very well. Roger came out, and we talked for a second, and we went through his music, and it was challenged, you know, because you kind of had to you could watch Roger's hands and get some cues for, you know, how tempos and things like that, but speed up, slow down, all those kinds of things. It was really fun and scary too. But anyway, it went well, and the services went well, and then we did the recording sessions that went well, and at some point, the evening went well, but at some point during the day, Roger said, he came over to me and said, "Come here, you know, hey, kid, come here." And he would call me kid sometimes. Anyway, just sit down a minute. And so he said, "You know, this is a big day for you." He said, and then very much the same way, he said, "You know, sometimes opportunity knocks, and what holds a lot of people back is they're just afraid to go through the door, and they're not prepared, and they're not confident, and maybe they can do it, maybe they can't, but, you know," he said, "Today, the opportunity knocked, and you went through the door," and he said, "Your life's never going to be the same after today." And he said, and then he told me the story of, he said, "Let me tell you what happened to me." And he said, "You know, I got a call on a Friday night to do a recording session a couple of days later, and I don't think I slept, and, you know, 48 hours or whatever, but he said that changed my life." And he said that was Autumn Leaves, and he said, "You know, I made a whole career out of that, and I'm still here." So he said, you know, so really inspirational.
Yeah, he was a pretty inspirational guy. All of us that knew him close were inspired by him. He had wonderful philosophies. He's a tough guy. A little tough, huh? At moments, but what a tender heart. And so much wisdom. So, thank you for sharing that. You also told me about a fun, we could talk all day, but yes.
I'll just tell my book. If I take too long. I will say there were 2 or 3 times in my life where Roger, you know, didn't have to. He was just a really personable guy, and he just pulled me over and said, "Hey, come here." And I was going, at the time, through a divorce, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, he was really, gave me some tremendous advice, and I've never forgotten it. But there was a Christmas Eve that he was performing, and I wasn't conducting for him that time. I was conducting other pieces with the orchestra, but because I wasn't, I would stand off to the side, and I was looking when Roger came on, you know, and he was playing this huge medley. And I was watching the jumbotron, I was watching his hands, and I noticed he kept going, and then he did this little dink, dink, dink with his little finger. It was a little dink, 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 and I thought, that's hilarious. And I watched it, there were 12 services on Christmas Eve, and I watched it, and I thought, that is hilarious. And he just kept going, dink, dink, dink. And so finally, in between, I guess it was late at night, but I went up and I you know what it reminded me of, and I don't have to be old enough to know, but the Marx brothers, there was Chico Marx, and he was this phenomenal player. But he used to do this little, and he would do this little boink, 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 look like a little gun. And little boink, boink, boink. And then so that's what that reminded me of, was Roger's little finger. So I said to him, Roger, you did a little thing with your little finger? He goes, yeah. And I said, that's hilarious. And he said, oh, well, that's kind of funny. And I said, yeah, it's like Chico Marx. And he goes, yeah, Chico. I said, did you know Chico Marx? And he goes, yeah, I know Chico. And then I didn't know he was kidding. And then, because he said, yeah, Chico used to take lessons from me. And I didn't catch on. And I said, really? And he said, and it's the only time I ever saw Roger almost get mad, but he said, no! How old do you think I am? So, but, just for a second.
A little fun comment. And it's a great story about, you said that you saw grown men cry.
Oh, yeah. I'll try to, I'm talking too much.
No, those are good stories.
Growing up, of course, when you're a music major, or you study music, or you play piano, you're just a read. I think I was in college and I was reading about, I think it was either Beethoven or Chopin, but there were newspaper articles or magazine articles that had been written, and they saved these things, and it was in a textbook I was reading, and it said something about, like, Beethoven had the ability, when he performed, was so moving that grown men would weep. And I thought, oh, brother. That was in the 70s. Oh, no, that's not. Come on, man. And I just thought, I never believed it. I never. Because I've heard thousands of piano players. Who makes people cry? Nobody. Well, I was doing a concert, and it was not at the Crystal Cathedral, but it was another venue, and Roger was, the soloist, and I was playing tuba, and I was sitting next to the same bass trombone player, and he was doing all the pop stuff, but then in the middle, it was kind of during the Desert Storm era, and there was a war going on, and so he just stopped in the middle of the concert, and he said, I just feel like I should play some Chopin, because he said, he left Poland when he was a young man, and he never returned, or, he wasn't, there was war going on, and I just feel like I just want to do that, so if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to play a little Chopin. And he told the orchestra, you could just I'm just going to play this. And so we got to relax, so I thought, cool, so we sat back and Roger started playing. And I hope I don't get choked up, but I started looking in the audience and I saw these men wiping tears. And it hit me what I read about someone being able to do that. And I thought, I can't believe this is happening, And I started to tap the guy next to me and lean over. And I was going to say, there's people crying. And when I said, I started to say that I couldn't, because I had this lump in my throat and I had tears in my eyes and I couldn't say it. And that's the power, that Roger had, just to, like Bryan said, just to be able to evoke that, and to, I'll just never forget that.
You had an amazing ability to reach into your heart. You really did. Actually, I'll tell you, I have a radio show coming up. You might have seen the poster. on his birthday, I was asked to do a 1-hour special. And I tell stories and share his music. And some of the stories behind some that we've shared here at the Nixon Library. But one of the things that I mentioned was probably every single concert I would get to, because he just had that ability. Just the songs that he would play, of course, many of us, you know the words or you know the movie. He played a lot of movie themes. He played a lot of songs that we grew up with that were, you know, your first love or your first, memory. And it would just hold your heartstrings. And I would just tear up, and I'd look around in the audience, and everybody else was too. Like you said, it was not just me. We all felt it, because he just had that ability to really reach your soul. So now we go to the man that Ralph Carmichael, who was what a wonderful partnership that was when the two of them worked together, because Ralph could just create the most beautiful orchestral and choral combinations. I mean, you've heard some of them today, right? I mean, just so stirring. So you knew the man so well. I met him as a little girl. I remember Ralph coming to the house and then working together on those arrangements. But you've met him and talked to him. So tell us some of those stories you shared.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here with all these wonderful musicians. Ralph got his start working church music. And Ralph not only did a lot of work with Roger, he also is known for his work with Nat King Cole. All three of those were preacher's kids, PKs. Now, they all had their own understandings of spirituality and how that fit into the world, but I think it may have been one of the things that attracted them. So early on, Ralph started writing big band music for his Christian college band, which was unheard of in the 40s. And took a lot of flack for it, but it ended up with a TV show in Los Angeles that won an Emmy called Campus Christian Hour. And from there, he started doing arrangements and writing music, but it was for church stuff. But because he worked in big studios and insisted on getting the best, either the recording process or the artists, the studio players, he insisted on the best, his fame started increasing. So by the late 50s, he was doing stuff when say, Rosemary Clooney wanted to do a hymns album. Her arranger, Buddy Cole, said, I don't know how to do that stuff, but Ralph, you do. So he brought Ralph in to do that work. Then he started getting involved in film work. And I just told you about one of them, that great classic that we all know and love, The Blob.
Love it.
Ralph did the music for that.
Scared to death.
But he had recorded a big symphonic hymns project, sacred project, in the New Capitol Records studio in the late 50s. And a copy of that album was given to Lee Gillette, who was Nat King Cole's producer. And that got them thinking, could there be a way to work with Ralph? Well, he needed a Christmas project. Nat was going to do a Christmas project, and the arranger they had lined up fell through. And he remembered Ralph. And if you ever hear those Christmas songs of Nat's on the radio or any other way today, those are Ralph's arrangements. And so he started working with a lot of pop artists. That was 1960. And by then, Roger was well on his way to creating a name for himself. And he worked with a lot of great arrangers. Pete King, Frank Hunter, and so many others. And I'm not sure who made the original connection, whether it was Roger or whether it was Dave Kapp. But I don't think Dave ever missed an opportunity to bring some big name talent to his label. And there was an arrangement where Lee Gillette at Capitol allowed Ralph to work for Kapp. He got permission, he got release, because he couldn't just go and do it. And their first project was Songs for the Soaring Sixties. And there were 5 great charts that Ralph did. And they went on to create, I want to say 12 complete albums, just Roger and Ralph, and another 8 or so over a period of about 10 years, where Ralph and several other arrangers participated. And then there was a final one around 2008, and those were all for CAP, or MCA, because MCA bought out CAP. And then I think it was 2008 or 2009, there was the Reader's Digest, London Project, Your Favorite Songs, or something of that thing. All-time favorites, recorded in London. And that was their last collaboration.
You mentioned that there was one deadline that Ralph was regretting.
Ralph was a master of strings, and brass, and big bands. He was not known for his punctuality. He would tell stories of staying up all night, working on arrangements. And he wasn't bragging, it was just the way he ran his business. And he was so busy, he could never say no to anyone. So he would do stuff for Roger, while he was at the same time, for instance, the music director for Roy Rogers' Dale Evans TV show. And he was doing all of that at the same time. He told a story where he stayed up like 3 days straight, working on all of that, and ended up in the hospital. But he couldn't say no. He just wanted to do music. So Ralph would work late, and that meant the copyist would have to take his work and prepare the charts for the instruments, for all the players, for the sessions. Well, he never would tell me which project it was that he was with your dad on, but there were 2 projects where the timing caught up. This was one, another one was with Nat King Cole. They had scheduled 3-hour session, 10 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon, and they were going to record 3 songs. Well, at 7 in that morning, 7 o'clock that morning when they were going to record at 10, the copyist brought the first set of arrangements over to Ralph at his house, because he had been staying up all night copying what Ralph had done. That was the first of the 3 songs. At that point, at 7 in the morning, Ralph gave the second chart to the copyist and said, take this, get working on it, I will meet you at the studio and give you the 3rd one. Now, it takes a while to write out parts. So Ralph was still finishing the 3rd chart, but he made it in time. He walked into the studio about 5 minutes ahead of time and had the first piece ready to go. Orchestra did it, Roger did it, everybody was happy. Dave Cap was in the control booth, and everybody was happy and smiling. And as they came to the end, the second chart and set of arrangements magically appeared, fortunately. So they went through the second recording session, and they had about a half hour, 45 minutes left to do the 3rd chart. But there was no chart. And Ralph kept saying, when Dave would ask, where is it? Oh, it's coming. So they'd all have a little bit of coffee. And Ralph would say, oh, there must be an accident on the freeway, something. Now, somebody talked about overtime at a studio session. And you don't do that. But the players are going to get played, the musicians are going to get paid, whether they're playing or not. And so there was about a half an hour when the musicians were just kind of wandering around with nothing to do, and everybody was drinking their coffee and waiting for the arrangement to show up. Well, on this particular session, Dave and Roger and Ralph had a fairly good relationship, and Dave was willing to pay some overtime just to get it done. And at about an hour into overtime, with nothing to play, the summons came from Dave Cap to Ralph. Roger was in the studio, in the control booth, probably hoping he could fade into the woodwork, because Dave Cap was not a happy man. And he went through a number of expletives, and the clean version is, Ralph, you are a bungling idiot, and you will never work in this town again. Well, They did. And they created a bunch more records, and in fact, Ralph was signed to do his own recordings. He ended up recording with Jack Jones and Shani Wallace. But that, he said he never again missed a deadline for Dave Kemp. And a similar story with Nat King Cole, but that's for a whole other story.
Wow. Poor Ralph. Well, I'm glad to hear it was David that was the one that laid down the harsh words on my daddy. I wasn't sure.
I'm sure Roger was in the corner just wishing he didn't have to be there.
Oh, goodness. Thank you. There were two albums that my father and Ralph did together that were Grammy nominees.
Mm-hmm.
And they had very different styles.
Very different styles. You heard a bit of one of them today. The family album of hymns, 1964, and filled with all kinds of great music. And again, with Ralph being a PK, Roger being a PK, Roger picked all the songs. These are the tunes he wanted to do, and Ralph created some wonderful orchestrations and strings and choir. I think they nicknamed or named the orchestra the Concert Grand Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And the choir was called the Wellington Choir. And I asked Ralph, okay, what? Wellington Choir? Oh, it was just somebody's idea in the PR department to make it sound bigger than it was. But they were studio players, studio singers. But they created this. And last year, you heard Eternal Father, Strong to Save. That was from that album. But Ralph always considered it one of the most beautiful and sensitive albums he ever did with Roger. And that was 1960.
I agree.
1964.
If you haven't heard it, well, it is really special. It's streaming now. They have it available, so you can hear it on
It's
any of the streaming
probably
channels.
probably my favorite of all the projects they've worked on.
It is, well, there was a lot of spirituality in that room, when that was created. All of them pulling from their hearts and their past and memories and their faith. It was really, really beautiful.
And one of the tracks comes from Roger's Navy days, Eternal Father, Strong to Save. And the mention today was about Jimmy Carter sharing the birthday. And it's my understanding that Jimmy Carter has asked for that recording to be played at his funeral.
The Carter Center reached out to us and wanted my father to provide a copy so that it would be ready. And at the time that he would pass. And in fact, on the 80th birthday, which is 20 years ago now, we were at the Carter Center. My father made this wonderful idea that every birthday, starting on his 75th, he'd play a piano marathon of 12 hours of piano requests from a free audience every year on his birthday, which was his way of celebrating his birthday. He used to say, you're supposed to do what you want to do, what you like to do, so play the piano. And he did, and it was the most wonderful way to spend a day. I would go to them and just have a wonderful time. What he would do is he would get little index cards, and people would put their request in a basket, and somebody would bring them up and line them out on the top of the piano, and he would just go from one song to the next, weaving in and out, and in keys, one key into the next key, and a little bit back again. He'd be in the middle of some beautiful song, and then all of a sudden, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star came in, and raindrops are falling on your head, and Wisconsin Fight Song, and it was magic. It really was. In fact, we're going to have a little bit of that fun today. But that was.
That was 1964, and
Yes.
It did get a Grammy nomination. I think it was in the top finalist 7 that year.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Then 1966 came along, and Ralph would say that every once in a while Roger would just call and say, hey, Ralph, I have an idea for a recording. Well, Ralph didn't like to say no, and he didn't often tell people that he was also doing projects for 3 other people at the same time. He just said, sure. Well, 1966, Roger called Ralph and said, Ralph, I have an idea for a rock and roll record. And Ralph thought, well, okay, you know, if I say no, I'm not going to get paid, so I'll say, yeah, sure, Raj. Now, 1966, you think back, rock and roll, it wasn't really, I'm not sure how to describe rock and roll in the 1960s, but it had made its mark already on the music industry, and a lot of the studio players were classically trained, and they did not like rock and roll music. They did, in fact, some of them almost refused to play it on an obsession. And Ralph had never really done anything called rock and roll before, but Ralph could probably write anything for anybody, including our friend Pat Boone. When Pat Boone, here's an aside, created one of his recordings a few years ago called In a Metal Mood. No more Mr. Nice Guy. They were covers of metal songs. And he asked Ralph to write one of the arrangements for it. And so it's on the album. Yeah, kind of crazy. And Ralph just kind of shrugged when he talked about it. Yeah, I did that. So 1966, Ralph's then teenage daughter, Carol, he and his daughter were having round and round conversations, arguments about this music called rock and roll. And Ralph said he'd go out to his car and find the station on his preset radio changed because his daughter had gotten in and changed them to all her rock and roll stations. And he'd come back and they'd have these big arguments about rock and roll and how stupid it was and how horrible it was and, you know, just the kind of parent-child thing. So Roger calls and said, hey, Ralph, I want to do a rock and roll record. And Ralph said, sure. And they went and recorded Born Free. Now, there is no way that can be considered rock and roll. But it had a Fender bass, it had an electric guitar, and it had a drummer playing even eighth notes. And that made it rock and roll. And it got a lot of airtime on rock and roll stations, which is hard to imagine today. And Ralph said one day his daughter Carol walked in and just kind of looked at him and said, are you the same Ralph Carmichael that I'm hearing on my rock and roll station? After all the conversations. But yeah, that was another Grammy nomination, and that album was certified gold.
Yes, it was. And it's interesting, you know, you talk about how many people raise their hand if they know who Roger Williams is. And I've had people ask me about my father, and I'll say, well, you know, he had some famous hits. His first one was Autumn Leaves. And then Born Free. Oh, I know Born Free! You know, because, of course, that was their time. Yeah. And it was a wonderful hit, I know. It was great. So now we have the wonderful musicians here. I'm so honored that they've come to join us. Oop, did I make that noise? I did. Sorry. Michael, you were there with my dad 15 years. Now, I'll do a real quick story about this before I turn you on to the mic. When my father first started touring, he had a different band. It was called the Quiet Men. And you guys, you remember that, right? Yeah, it was before you. Right. And they would tour on the bus. They had a tour bus, which was really fun. It's a Roger Williams tour on the side of the big bus. And they travel around. And if you've taken a look at my Facebook page, I have pictures of him on this big tour bus with a spinet piano in the back where he'd practice as they drove from town to town. And, you know, the concerts were so close together at that time because he had just had this big hit, and everybody wanted to hear him. And so it made sense that you would just go by bus, and he took these musicians with him. Well, fast forward, we moved to California from New York, and touring with band members was not inexpensive. And his manager said to him, you know, you better cut down. You're spending way too much on your shows. And why don't you just get some local musicians? Well, my dad started doing that. And he would fly across the country get in, hire these musicians, bring them in, practice with this group, with music they've never seen before. All day long he would rehearse, and then that night give a concert, which was exhausting, as you can imagine. The worst part of it was they weren't tight, you know. You would see it on his face. I could pick it up on him right away. He'd turn around and he'd give a look to the guys like, come on, get with the beat. It was written all over his face. I could just see the anxiety of just being so frustrated that he wanted this show to be good, and he was a perfectionist. And that just didn't go over too well. So years later, when we met you guys, now, am I wrong? Weren't you remind Jimmy that I thought that's what I had heard. I didn't know if I had the story straight. Jimmy had this wonderful group that my father, and you'll have to tell us how that all happened, because you'll educate me too. But from that moment forward, I remember my father saying, well, you know, I've been told I really shouldn't be spending what I'm spending. And I said, Dad, and we had this discussion. I said, Dad, your show is so tight now, and you can relax and just play and just do, you know, what you love to do. I don't care if you're not making any extra money even. You know, if you broke even, it wouldn't matter. At this point, just do your music, enjoy your shows, and, you know, your sound, this group, he was never better. You know, it really made a difference. Well, it's true. It's really true. And so, with that being said, you were with him 15 years, and in fact, you were on all the marathons.
Oh,
all those marathons. You did the marathons.
He and I did the marathons together, and that was a great experience. I just have to start. Well, first, I want to send such kudos to Bryan. I don't know anybody in Los Angeles or anywhere else that could have done the job that he did, capturing the heart and soul and the technique of Roger Williams. There's really nobody else that could have done it. World class, absolutely. And thank you, Alice, for doing this tribute for Roger. We just miss him terribly.
Thank you, Joelle, for making it happen.
The first day I met him was at the audition in his house. And we take your time getting into the music, kind of walks around and just talks. And I'm looking at all these albums on every wall, going the whole, and I said, wow, you've been busy. He says, well, there's more down the hall. Wow. He says, you want to know the funny thing? He says, after I did the very first one, it was such an agonizing process for me. I told myself I'd never do it again. He did it 120 times. Unbelievable. And if you look at anybody else's discography now, if they have 5 records, they're doing pretty good. 120. And he did agonize over every note, every arrangement, and it was all about the audience. Roger was a pop artist as an instrumentalist. That's probably the hardest thing to accomplish in the music business. Many pop artists that sing and dance and do their thing, but to be an instrumentalist and to make it as a pop artist is almost impossible. And that's why there's only been a handful over time. But he did it because he cared about his audience. Every decision he made was about, what are they feeling? He'd always say, what are they feeling? And we use dynamics a lot, which in musical term, it's varying the volume and intensity, way down to real big. And we play so quiet sometimes. He said, we get down, he says, I want them all to go, what's going on? What are they doing? What are they doing? Well, that's a way to draw that audience in. It's like somebody whispering in a room, a crowded room. You whisper long enough, the whole room will go quiet trying to hear that person whispering. It's the same concept. But he cared about his audience so much, every decision. That's why I consider him the ultimate pop artist. A lot of jazz artists say, you know, I'm cool, check me out, look what I can do. But no, he was reaching out and grabbing them. And he would often tell stories, great stories, in a sort of Garrison Keillor kind of way. And I remember the holidays especially, he tells these very melancholy stories setting up a song we're going to play. And they were pretty gut-wrenching. And I look in the audience and there's people crying out there. Even the band is falling apart. and I remember going to him later after the show. I said, Raj, you're killing them out there, man. These people are crying. He says, doesn't matter. Laughing or crying, it's all the same. People come here to feel. And boy, did I learn something. Because those same people that were crying at that story he was telling in the music were on their feet in the standing ovation at the end. So his way, and you all touched on that, of reaching out and grabbing the heart of people with an instrument that was just amazing. And we were so far off the page of the arrangements, we were so in sync with him and breathing at the same time and feeling. It was this incredible synchronicity, I'll call it, amongst the band. And we all, even though Roger, of course, is the artist and the star, we felt like, wow, we're really part of this thing, you know, to make this happen. And it was so cool. We did the marathons, which were incredible. I have to tell an aside story to the one you mentioned at the Carter Museum, the 80th. And we were taking a break, and in the back room there was a big stairwell and a landing. And I was up on the landing, and President Carter's private offices were right off that landing. My wife joined me on that trip. And she goes, so we're standing up, she goes, where's the restroom? I said, just right around the corner there. So she goes, disappears to use the restroom, goes right around, just the second she goes around the corner, here comes Jimmy Carter up the stairs. And to me, meeting a president is a big deal, okay? It's a big deal. So here he comes, and oh my God, she's in the bathroom. There was a Secret Service lady right here. You gotta go get my wife, she's in the bathroom. Go get her. He says, I can't leave my post. No, you gotta get her. No, I can't. Oh. So he comes up, we have a 2 or 3 minute conversation, and then he retreats and the door shuts to his office and she comes out. I go, you had to go now. Just had to do. I've never let her live it down since. She missed that whole opportunity. Another funny story. This is a Roger story. We every couple of years would play with a pops concert with the St. Louis Symphony, and they had a conductor, pops conductor there, Richard Heyman, who had in his own career had, I think, a hit record, and he was a harmonica player, a very, very good harmonica player. He had played a very expensive custom chromatic harmonica, and he'd always be featured in the shows in one way or another. And so one year, Roger and Richard got together before the show, and Richard had his idea. He says, listen, Roger, we're going to do a gag here. We're going to play this thing together, and then you're going to come off the piano, and you're going to be all mad about what I did, and we're going to argue a little bit, and then you're going to grab my harmonica, and see, I'm going to put my good one in my pocket. I've got a spare cheap one in my pocket here, and you're going to grab it, and you're going to stomp on it. Grab it from me and just stomp on it. Oh, good, that'll be a good gag. Okay. So the whole thing, they do the song, they get to the end, and Roger's so excited about the joke, he jumped his cue, and he grabbed the good one, put it, and broke it into a million pieces. And he's like, yeah, that was kind of funny. Made the joke better for us because we knew what was happening, but, you know. But I could go on all day about stories and what a privilege it has been to work with him for 15 years. I also tour managed the last half of that. And we, you know, there's happy times, there's sad times, there's all kinds of, it runs the whole gamut. I also need to just say, I feel double blessed because you saw Pat Boone earlier, and I've been his bass player for 34 years and toured all over the world with him, and we're still working once in a while at 90. It's pretty amazing. And Raj, he played right up to the end too. He was going for it, and he used to tell people in interviews, they'd say, well, what are you going to do, Raj, when you retire? He said, well, they tell me that you retire to go do the things you love to do. He said, I guess I've been retired since I was 3. So that's just some of the stuff about Raj, and if you have any questions later, I'd be happy to answer. But truly a unique, one-of-a-kind individual, and such a privilege to work with him.
Thank you. Yeah, and as my father, always in the concerts, he loved these guys so much. And he would always take, of course, a moment to introduce each one of them. And he would always say, and now the last and the least. And then he'd say, well, that's what the other musicians tell me. Our favorite Sicilian, Mr. Jimmy Carnelli.
And then every once in a while he would go, and you can look him up on the internet. And the other guys would go, no, don't look him up on the internet. Roger Williams. Roger Williams is one of the most unique, unbelievable people I've ever met in my life. The day I met Roger changed my life forever. I was an educated musician, but I never understood music like I did after I met Raj. Raj and I became like family. I had just lost my dad, and Roger became like my second father. I said to him one time, sitting in a limo, hey, Raj, that now the dad's gone, would you be my father now, proxy father? He said, nah, I'm like a terrible father. I don't think I want to be your father. I'm doing the best I can with who I have. I learned so much about music from Roger. I had the joy of putting a band together for him later on, as Alice was talking about. Roger would rehearse musicians, and when I first met Roger, I was subbing for his regular drummer. My first gig with Roger was with the Calgary Symphony. I had seen the music only 48 hours earlier for the first time, and got on a plane and got off the plane in 39 below zero weather. Went to a piano store to do the rehearsal with the primaries from the orchestra and Roger. I had never spoken to Roger before. I only remember what he said to Eddie, our guitar player, who called me in to sub, if this guy's not good, you're fired. Because when I showed up at the airport, I had very long hair and a mustache and earrings and certainly did not look the part. So Roger was a little scared the first time he looked at me. So we go in and we do the rehearsal in the piano store, and I hadn't spoken to Roger yet. We both ended up in the bathroom at the same time, and as we were coming out of the bathroom, I had the nerve to say, Mr. Williams, how am I doing? He says, you're doing fine. If I'm not yelling at you, you're fine. That was my first intro. Next thing we did was we played a concert in Medicine Hat, which was right on the border of Canada and the United States. We had rehearsed at the Symphony Hall in Calgary, which was this unbelievable place, and you could hear a pin drop even without a microphone, But we only rehearsed there, so the first concert was in a college. Well, I had set my way I set up really right next to Roger, where I could reach out and touch him. And in this concert, I set up a little bit differently because of the stage configuration. So every time I went to go look at my music, my eye had to come off of Roger. I'll try to condense this story because it's really long. So anyway, after the concert, one of the last tunes was Girl from Ipanema, which was a beautiful arrangement he did. And I made a mistake, and the whole orchestra goes boom, and I go boom, afterwards. So I'm seriously embarrassed. But, I was doing the best I can. Okay, so after the concert, I'm standing in the dressing room, and I'm taking off my tuxedo, and all of a sudden I feel eyes burning through me. I turned around, it's Roger looking at me. Now, he doesn't know me hardly at all. He looks at me, he goes, crap. He takes me into his dressing room, and he makes me stand up while he sits down. And he looks at me and he goes, Mr. Carnelli, he hadn't called me Mr. Carnelli yet. He called me Jimmy. And then he looked at me and he says, I have a question for you. And I said, what's that, Mr. Williams? And he said, why weren't you watching me? Well, I couldn't speak. I said, well, I didn't ask you how you set up. I wanted to know why you weren't watching me. I got upset. I said, Roger, I'm sorry. I turned my head to look up. Jimmy, I don't care what's in the music. I want you to watch me. I want you to be connected to me. Okay, Raj, I understand that. From that day forward, and you could ask Michael, wherever we set up, if I couldn't see his hands, they would move me or the piano. Because I was the conduit, which was my joy, my honor, and my education. To be able to, when we played with the Crystal Cathedral Orchestra, he would bring me sometimes and have me play drums so that I could communicate with Johnny, so Johnny could communicate with the orchestra. Trying to be a musician around Roger Williams, holy crap. As far as I was concerned, he was like from another planet. Did you ever see Roger play two songs, one in one hand, one in another, and then whistle a third? I used to look at him and go, what planet are you from? Anyway. The wonderful thing about Raj was that because he had a relationship with his family and his band who became his family, we honored and loved him so much that there was nothing that we wouldn't do to make his show go well. Because that's all he cared about. He didn't want to go to dinner with us. He didn't want to do anything. As soon as we got to a town, he went straight to the venue. Michael would bring him straight to the venue, and he would sit down behind the piano. That was his first concern. What's this piano like? What's it going to do when I sit behind it tonight? I don't want to be surprised. That was so important to him. If you called him at any time of the day, he'd answer the phone like this, yeah. And I go, Raj, it's Jimmy. Yeah, Jim. What can I do for you? I said, Raj, I just wanted to ask you a question. What are you doing, Raj? He says, working. Now, truthfully, that was a true statement. Roger hated vegetables, so he used to grind vegetables and drink his vegetables, or hold his nose and drink his vegetables. That was one thing he could be doing. He could be in the restroom, or he could be having a chicken sandwich, which is his favorite meal in life. But if he wasn't doing those things, he was practicing. And when you said about preparation meets opportunity, he looked at me one day and he said, Jim, I want you to know that there's no such thing as luck. It's preparation meets opportunity. And if you're not prepared when your opportunity arises, the guy behind you will get the gig. And it won't be you. So I want to make sure that you understand that the kind of dedication that it takes means that this is a lifestyle. This is not a job. This is what you do every day of your life. This is what you eat, you breathe, and you drink music. And he was the example of that if I had ever met anyone in my life as a musician. And my brother's a famous studio guitar player who works with this beautiful, you're amazing, man. He blew my mind today. I had the joy of, like Michael, being in close proximity to Roger in every concert. What an education in dynamics, in feeling. Roger could make me cry playing 3 notes. And he did it more than once. You know, you don't meet people like him very often. And when he takes you under his wing, you're a very lucky person. But it's not luck, it's called being blessed. When a man like that takes you under his wing, your life changes. And he changed mine. Because I was never a drummer like I am today, and I still have a lot to learn. But that man changed my whole way of approaching my instrument. He used to say to me, I don't want to hear you, I want to feel you. If you don't have something musical to contribute, don't play. Be quiet. And I used to just watch him, And I remember one time, and only Michael will remember this, we were going on tour and we were practicing at his living room, and we had been there like 3 or 4 times already, and he hadn't said anything to me in all those rehearsals. And finally, just out of frustration, I said, Raj, everything okay at the drum set? Yeah, if everything wasn't okay, I'd be telling you right away. You know that, right? There's so many stories I can tell, stories I probably shouldn't. I got to know Roger as a great human being he was. Roger always said that he prayed through his fingers. That was his contribution. So if you try to corner him about what his religion was, he would always say, I believe in God and I pray through my fingers. And that was also a great lesson to me, because I truly believe, and I'm sure Michael and everybody up here would agree, this is not something you learn, this is a gift that you develop. The Lord gives you a gift and you develop it. And if you're fortunate enough to be around someone like Roger Williams, that gift develops in a different way. It develops in a way that I wanted to make him proud of me every time he sat behind his drums. And I think I did, from time to time. But there were times where he certainly let me know when I wasn't doing that. And that made me a better player. I will miss him for the rest of my life. One of the finest people I've ever known. Thank you.
So beautiful, Jimmy. And I felt the same way as a child, Disappointing dad was the worst.
Yeah, but it didn't matter because he loved his family and he loved his music. And he was so dedicated to it that, there was a piano in the living room, there was a piano in the Indian room, and the last thing is there was a big statue of the cat, had a sign around it that said, where's the melody? Because all pianists, especially jazz pianists, have the tendency to start to improvise, and you lose the melody of the tune that they're playing. All of a sudden, you're trying to look for the melody. And I said to Roger one time, I said, it's amazing how you have taken these hits and they're popular for now. He said, Jim, the only thing I really do well is play the melody. That's what he told me. Because he was friends with people like, he knew Oscar Pedersen, he knew Chick Corea, he knew all these great jazz pianists. But not one of them could play a melody like Roger. Am I right about that? He could play 4 notes and you could feel a chill go up your spine and then your eyes were wet. And that is a true, true gift that he shared with the rest of us.
That's what David Kapp actually said to him. You play the melody like no one I had ever heard. You play the words, and that's what made him want to sign with him right away. It was that gift.
He got a standing ovation every concert we ever played. I never remember one. Do you, Michael? No. Every time. Every time. It was such an amazing experience to say that I was part of his organization. And the last little funny story I'll just tell is, I used to tease Roger and tell him that when he died, he was going to turn to vanilla yogurt. Because wherever we were on the road, he had to find a tasty freeze. Or if we were at the airport, he used to go, Jim, go over to McDonald's and get me one of those yogurt. So I used to go over and get him a cone, and he used to eat that, and then he'd ask me to go get him another one. So I used to make fun of him. I said, so when you die, you're going to turn to yogurt.
Well, we'll open up this wonderful discussion if you have any questions, and then we want to take your requests because we're going to be treated with a wonderful medley as the finale of this panel. So any questions? Briefly, if there's anything you want to ask any of us, or should we just get on with the music? All right, you want to ask what songs, or do you want me to ask, or how do we do this?
Well, I was amazed I just have to say that this is one of my favorite things to do in life because, you know, I call it the melted jukebox inside. And knowing that your father had done these mashups and medleys and listening to them just elated me. And it's one of my favorite things to do. So, I saw him on stage. He had somebody write down. I've been keeping written journals all my life. Okay. So, what I do, I'm just going to ask anybody to shout out the name of a song or the name of a style, and just keep going. And then I'll stop you. And if I don't know something, maybe I'll try to play it in that style, but I probably won't play it. So, ready, set, go. Somewhere in time, okay.
The theme from the Love Boat.
Love Boat, Love Boat, love it.
Great story on that.
Okay. Yeah, keep coming up with songs. Two different worlds. I'm not sure if I know that, but I'll
Godfather.
Oh, Godfather. But you know, Jimmy, we're really only custodians sitting in the black chairs. Okay, Godfather.
Ghost Riders in the Sky.
Oh, I love that song. I would listen to that all the time.
Request Family's got Canadian Sunset.
Canadian Sunset.
Really popular song, yeah.
Okay,
Impossible Dream.
let's say we got Impossible Dream again, and then what? Oh, Thornbirds. Yeah, that's Ed Mancini. Yeah, that was one of his later ones.
Born Free.
Born Free. Okay.
Moon River.
Moon River. Oh, you know, Mancini grew up 20 miles south of me.
Yeah, a lot of people would ask
In Western PA.
to play Moon River or King of the Road, right?
That's
King
right.
Or Andy Williams.
Yeah. Anybody with any ideas of styles or approaches or anything like that? Yeah. You know, you could say classical, jazz, rock and roll. Yeah. I heard someone say classical, yeah.
Moonlight in Vermont.
Oh, I love that. Moonlight in Vermont. That's fantastic. Okay. Keep going.
Stars and Stripes.
Stars and Stripes. Wow, I could do the little Pinky Piccolo.
Gee.
Hotel California.
Oh, good. Hotel California is Stairway to Heaven reversed. I did a version of that.
Sweet Caroline.
Oh, yeah, I like him too. Hotel California with our...
Ain't no mountain high enough.
Ain't no... Oh, my God, ain't no mountain. Ain't no mountain.
I would have been real upset if we got the names.
Sweet Carolina. Good old Neil. He wrote so many great songs. Anything else? Anything you think of?
Coming to America.
Is that...
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming to America. Yeah. Okay. Well, when I do this, it ends up looking like a modern piece of art. You know, with scribbles. And so, what I can read here is Somewhere in Time, Love Boat, Godfather. What is the what can't wait? Two can't wait? Yeah. Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Hotel California, Ghost Riders in the Sky, and Impossible Dream, Thornbirds, Born Free, Mancini, Moon River, classical, Sweet Caroline, Moonlight in Vermont. That's a nice moon song. I like moon songs. Coming to America, and I just want to make sure I have this one song here. Stars and Stripes. I got to put a flag so that I remember. Little flag. Okay, so these are always different. I haven't had the pleasure of playing this piano before, and so I'm just going to sit down, and I won't need to warm up on it. I'll just play a melody and put all these pieces together, and hopefully you'll hear them all. And what I like to do is overlap them and put them together in a medley and scan as I'm playing and basically just create a little mini movie of a little mini emotional movie of the song that you just laid out for me. So I'm going to tear this out of my books.
I used to say, when he did 4 inches, he used to say that in the audience, you know, I can't wait to hear how this
Yeah, I can't wait. It's so much fun. Okay. Well, there's enough light here. You know what I'll do? Oh, that's plenty of light. This is a kind of an unscripted moment. Alice, I want to present this to you.
Thank you. I love it. That's great. Oh, guys, thank you so much. This has been so enlightening for me as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's it. Unless you have any questions or anything else.